right, so...
Well, can I ask them something?
Yeah.
Who knows the plant-based dance move to the long chain fat? Am I saying it right? Does anybody remember that? Oh, look at Gwen.
Okay, Gwen, go ahead and do it again.
Can you please demonstrate? Do it again.
Yeah. If we all do that in rhythm, we're all going to get disfellowship. So you can't do that.
Well, yes, that is correct. Well, tonight you're in for another treat. Dr. Guthrie will come up and present. How many of you got the manual, the user manual? You brought your manual? And if not, we have some more back there. And at the end of class, you are free to purchase those. And if you're not going to purchase those, we just ask not to write in them, please. All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and pass it to Dr. Guthrie.
Let's begin with prayer before we get started. Dear Father, we're grateful that your people have come out this evening to hear more about the health message. Lord, it's just encouraging to see so many that are interested in learning ways to increase their health. And Lord, we ask that you be with Dr. Guthrie as he teaches. There's so much for us to learn, and we're grateful for his time this evening. We thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Welcome back. It's good to see you all here, even some new faces, so that's good. This is the second of our programs, and we're going to be talking about the as-grown principle. I wonder if that'll be the answer to a quiz next week. I don't know. I don't make the questions. So our goals are to, we want to understand the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. We're going to look a little bit at macronutrients. We're going to talk about how food is different than nutrients, then the as-grown principles, and then sleep and gratitude and how they affect your health. Now, as we did last time, we have a little bit of a video that I hope you can hear. Is number 2 on there? Let's see if that'll work.
Not long after she started working in my office, Anne, a nurse, told me her story. Her family struggled with all kinds of health issues: obesity, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and even heart disease. One night, when she phoned her sister, she noticed that Nancy sounded unusually upbeat. Nancy said, "I feel great. I read a new book and it changed my life. I've lost weight, I'm sleeping better, I'm full of energy." Anne was shocked to learn that the book was my book, Eat Plants, Feel Whole. She asked me about it the next day, and when I gave her a copy, she agreed to try my recommendations. Soon she started feeling great too, just like Nancy. When she visited her cardiologist at her next exam, she and her doctor were thrilled to see that her high blood pressure had started to come down, and she had lost weight. Her LDL, or bad cholesterol levels, had dropped dramatically, as had her total cholesterol. She was able to reduce her medications immediately, and her insurance company even sent her a $400 refund on her insurance premium because her health was so much better. As you think about how whole plant foods bring your body back to life, keep in mind that you eat food and not nutrients. The health community tends to focus on macro or micronutrients, highlighting one or another as its benefits are discovered. But nothing works alone. Every nutrient interacts with other nutrients: our genes, our environment, our hormones, and many other things. A better approach is to focus on dietary patterns and to identify the dietary pattern that is healthiest. Remember, we eat food, not nutrients. Most evidence points to the best diet as one that includes a broad, colorful spectrum of minimally refined plant-based foods. These foods provide the greatest overall benefit to our bodies. If there was a single nutrient that promised a 15 to 30% decrease in the chance of you dying, would you be interested? There is. Fiber. It's the super nutrient most of us don't get enough of. If your diet includes lots of animal products and refined carbohydrates, you probably don't get enough fiber. Animal products have no fiber. Refined carbohydrates have little or none. By adding more plant foods into your meals, you'll up your fiber intake. And that's not hard to do. It's easy. People who are learning to eat healthier always have questions such as, where will I get enough protein? Are carbs harmful? Is all fat bad? How much water do I need? How much salt is too much? These questions and more will be discussed in this session. Now let's talk about principle number 2, the as-grown principle. This means that the closer you eat to the way the food was grown, the better your health will be. We looked at the whole food spectrum last time. Here's that second dimension, the whole food axis. At the top are foods that are more natural and unprocessed. At the bottom are foods that are highly processed and food-like. For example, a whole apple is healthy, very healthy. Press it into juice, and it may still be healthy, but less so. Bake the apple into a pie with all the white flour and saturated fat in the crust, and its health benefits drop even further. Or eat the apple in a packaged breakfast bar, and that apple is about as processed and unhealthy as it can be. Or consider the humble potato. A baked potato topped with beans and chopped chives, it's much healthier than a potato salad, potato chips, or French fries. As you implement the as-grown principle, try to choose more unprocessed and minimally processed foods that are closer to their natural state. These high-quality foods will help you to experience better and more vibrant health.
Now let's talk about how to apply the as-grown principle in the grocery store. The produce aisle is one of the best places to find as-grown food, but there are other places too. You can find dry beans and peas, whole grains, and raw nuts. And canned beans are simple and great to have when you're in a hurry. Salsa, hummus, whole grain breads and tortillas, rye crisps, and plant milks are other simple foods found in most grocery stores. In your kitchen, you can apply the as-grown principle by using less refined and more natural products in your dishes. For instance, use brown rice instead of white rice. Use whole grain flours instead of white flour. When eating out, think about which menu items are closest to their natural state. A green salad with a spritz of lemon is much healthier than breadsticks or nachos. Steamed veggies are healthier than a serving of white pasta. And rather than smothering your baked potato in butter, sour cream, and cheese, try something new like steamed broccoli, sauteed mushrooms, black bean chili, or salsa.
Our bodies need sleep. And if we don't get enough, we aren't able to perform at our best. Insufficient sleep has been linked to high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, obesity, brain aging, and even dementia. So how can you get more good quality sleep? Here are a few tips. Turn off all the digital screens at least 1 hour before going to bed. Avoid caffeine intake during the day. Establish a regular bedtime routine to let your body know it's time to sleep. Exercise regularly and make sure you finish your workout at least 2 hours before bedtime. Try deep breathing, listen to peaceful music, or pray and meditate before going to bed. Remembering our blessings has a powerful impact on our health. If you're not in the habit of keeping a gratitude journal, I encourage you to try it. Making a list of what you're grateful for releases dopamine, the pleasure hormone. Showing gratitude can also reduce pain levels, relieve stress, improve your sleep, increase your energy, and help ward off anxiety and depression.
That was an interesting time several years ago when I made the film. Those memories flood back on me. So I trust you enjoyed it and maybe gave some insight into what we'll talk about tonight. I was really enjoyed the experience with the nurse who discovered, right, her sister lived way up north, and sister was having a problem with a bit of, I think, maybe postpartum depression, but low energy, just couldn't really move very well. And every time she talked to her sister, which they did weekly, the sister was always kind of tired and discouraged. And then she found the book and started to do it, and all of a sudden perked up. In your participants manual on page 37, you'll see that story kind of written out. I pulled out some of the numbers here. Her LDL was high. It was at 237. It's supposed to be under 100, so it was really high. And they put her on a cholesterol-lowering medicine, and it dropped all the way down to 175. Now, it's still supposed to be less than 100, and it's still high even on the cholesterol medicine. And then she did in the back of the what we call the trade book, the thick one. There's a 18-day program with menus and when to eat what. And she did that, was following it to the letter. And when she went back to the cardiologist, her LDL was at 88. Pretty cool. And the cardiologist said, we'll cut that cholesterol medicine in half. And if you keep it up, next time we'll just stop it. Can you imagine her surprise? Her total cholesterol had dropped all the way to 143. Wow. Really a good response to plant-based eating. So plant-based eating is something you've heard some things about. We've talked a bit about. What do you think of when you think of plant-based eating, plant-based cooking? What does that sound like to you? How would you describe that?
Real food.
Gwen's on my side. She says real food. Yeah, I appreciate that. It is real food, and there, I think it's Michael Pollan kind of described the common American diet as, it was just in my tip of my tongue here, they're food-like rather than actual real food. So a lot of things are made to kind of look and feel like food. When you get, the little pieces of chicken, those are so processed, they're not even close to what the chicken was, right? And often our potato chips, you slice them and then you dip them in oil and you add salt to them, and now they're, I'll bet you can't eat just one, sort of a thing. So the more processed they are, it seems, the more trouble they cause. Anybody else have a thought about when I say plant-based? Here we have another hand up. What do you think of when we say plant-based eating?
Well, what I think of is from the garden. So like when I was growing up, my grandparents had a big old garden. So whenever I go up in the summertime, we'd always pick fresh fruits, vegetables. So that's what I picture in my head, is eating all that stuff right from the garden.
Excellent, excellent. Some people, and I've run into people like this, believe that if you're a vegan, that you're close to translation. If you're a lacto-ovo vegetarian, you're kind of getting there. And if you're one of those meat eaters, you're, not so good. This is not a good perspective. Okay? It's not an honest one. It's not a fair one, because people can be meat eaters and be a lot healthier than a vegan or a vegetarian. Did you know that? People who focus a lot on whole plants do much better health-wise. Focus on on plants and to have small amounts of animal products are much healthier than those who are vegan or vegetarian and eating a lot of refined products. I'm arguing here that the refining process is really part of the problem. And so if we kind of think of it that way, I would rather not think of vegan or vegetarian as necessarily the healthy. I would like to point you towards plant-based eating, which is eating plants minimally processed, best if you can pull them out of the garden. You know, the whole farm-to-table thing, we're beginning to understand that in these days. I mean, there are several different words, right? We've got the pescatarian. You've probably heard of those, right? So they eat fish. And we have, has anybody ever met a raw foodie? Will only eat raw food. And I have some friends from my past who decided that was the path that they wanted. That's not something that you need to do. Really, we want to focus on eating minimally processed whole plant foods and use other things. I encourage patients, if they're going to use animal products, to use them as condiments or flavoring. So small amounts, eating lots of plants is your major. That's the most important thing. So what are the benefits of I think we already talked about the different types of folks. What are the benefits of eating a whole food plant-based diet? Well, on page 39 of your book, you'll see on the right side there's a big green box hanging out over those yummy tacos. May reverse type 2 diabetes, lowers blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar levels. That's what happened to my nurse. I mean, she really got better. Calms atherosclerosis, inflammation, and may even reverse atherosclerosis. That's the hardening of the arteries that causes heart attacks and other problems. Decreases the risk of heart disease and stroke. There's reverse heart disease. Promotes weight loss. Aids digestion and supports gut health. Protects against cataracts and macular degeneration. That's interesting, isn't it? Stimulates collagen production for smooth, wrinkle-free skin. Protects skin against sun damage. Clarifies skin and reduces acne. There's actually some very good studies out there that milk really increases acne, causes inflammation in the little sweat pores. So I often will share that article with patients, you know, the younger ones who are coming in worried about their acne. Some of you old folks probably don't have as much of this. Lowers the risk of certain types of cancer, prevents or even treats erectile dysfunction, slows aging, increases life expectancy, improves memory and brain function. So these things are reported in the scientific literature. Something worth looking at. Certainly increasing your plant-based eating is beneficial for you. So we want to talk a little bit about macronutrients. You've probably heard of micronutrients. These are the vitamins and minerals. Macronutrients are kind of the bigger amount of what we eat. And you've probably heard of these. I list 5 of them, although every nutritionist that I ever took a class from said there were 3. But I think they missed a couple, so we'll talk a little about those today, okay? So you've probably heard of fat being a macronutrient, and some people go on low-fat diets, which is not all bad, easier to do with plants. Carbohydrates, and of course proteins. Each of those, well, it's 9 calories per gram of fat, and about 4 calories per gram of both carbohydrate and protein. And then my last 2 are fiber and water. Okay, you heard a little bit about fiber. Fiber has 0 calories. You put it in here and it comes out there. Right? And water, of course, no calories unless you add it in, right? Soda and those types of things have a lot of water, but they add some other calories in. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going to start, I think, with the carbohydrates. A friend of mine who lectures on carbohydrates likes to use this little story. We're going to consider two towns, Petersville and Paulsville. Okay? They both get about 35 inches of rain a year. But in Petersville, the rain kind of dribbles all year long. 3 or 4 days every week there's a little bit of rain coming. And what do you think Petersville looks like? Well, it's green. There's water. Their plants are growing. The tree is putting out its flowers and fruit. So it's doing well. In Paulsville, the water all comes at once. Okay? There's a flood that comes, and it's one day. They can count on it. Sometime during the spring, there's going to be so much water. What's that town going to look like? Paulsville is going to be dry, and there's going to be gullies where the water tried to leave, right? And there's going to be problems with flooding when all that water comes. So if we look at carbohydrates as Petersville and Paulsville, we might learn a little something about how to address the carbohydrates we eat. And we talked about this a little bit last time. If you take the carbohydrates in quickly, so they're very fast carbohydrates, you're actually flooding the system, and there's a flood of sugar inside your blood, and that causes problems. Inflammation, for one thing, sludging of the blood. You probably are aware, if you have a real sweet meal, how your brain gets a little bit groggy and you kind of want to fall asleep, right? So the blood's not flowing as well because it's being flooded with all the carbohydrates. If, on the other hand, the carbohydrates are released slowly, then there's not a flood. It's kind of a drizzle, right? An all-year drizzle. So the sugar doesn't go up high. You don't have the inflammatory response. You don't have the increase of insulin, which tends to make us gain weight. Better to have a slow release of carbohydrates. So how do we do that? Well, the best way to do that is to eat the carbohydrates as they're packaged with the fiber that God put within the plants. So when you take the food with fiber in it, the carbohydrates with fiber in them, it tends to go in more slowly, especially if you have other fiber, salad, and those types of things with the meal. Usually we don't just eat one thing with our meal. We eat a whole meal that includes a variety of things, and if they all have fiber, the sugar will be released much more slowly. Does that make sense to you? So it's an important principle. When the sugar goes in more slowly, there's much less damage to the body than if you flood it. So a plant-based diet is high in fiber. You heard it on the film, didn't you? Animal products don't have fiber in them. Plants generally do, unless they've been highly processed. And if they're processed, the fiber tends to be taken out. It seems like God put fiber in just about all the plants. So where can we find fiber? Well, we've already talked about beans. You got that answer correct very quickly. They tend to be very high in both soluble and insoluble fiber. Whole grains are much better than refined grains. When you have rice, and it's a brown rice, they've left the hull on, it has the vitamins, minerals, and the fiber in it. When you polish that up, it takes those things off, and you end up with, quotes, white rice. Now, some people don't particularly care for the flavor of brown rice if they're used to white rice. If you're trying to make a change, and you're trying to get your tongue and palate used to it, use half brown rice and half white rice together, and then cook it up. And you'll find that your tongue will kind of get used to those new flavors, and that can make a good difference for you. Let's see. Barley, buckwheat, oats, quinoa. Has anybody had quinoa? Yeah, you recognize that? So that's an interesting grain. We had some for breakfast this last week. Rye, rice, wheat, and millet. So we use a lot of whole grains at our house. This last week, Dina said, we're out of millet, order some more. So I got on Amazon, and sure enough, it'll be delivered this next week. So we enjoy our millet too. Fruits tend to be high in fiber as well. Interesting for those who have diabetes and are struggling trying to keep the blood sugar down. There are some fruit that's actually a little slower in absorption and some fruit that's a little faster. Here, let me help you with that. It ends up that the northern fruits tend to be more like Petersville and have the slow effect of the sugar going in, where the southern fruits tend to have the more rapid glucose absorption. So what are the northern fruits? Well, we could say berries, the stone fruit like plums, the apples, pears, those types of things. Does that make sense? Berries happen to be the very best. They have the slowest release of the glucose. Southern fruits, more like mango. Interesting, banana, the riper it is, the faster the sugar goes. If it's a little on the greener side, it goes in more slowly. So mangoes, oh, they're so good. And for most of us, that's fine. Some of us who are having a hard time controlling the blood sugars, then it may be worthwhile decreasing the amount of those one eats. So, vegetables. Some vegetables have a higher load of sugar and maybe a little less fiber. White potatoes, for example, are not quite as good as the sweet potatoes. You'd think sweet potato would be worse, right? Because it's sweet, but actually the sweet potato releases its sugar more slowly, so a little more like Petersville. Above ground vegetables end up being the very best. Above ground vegetables include things like, what kind of things do you think of above ground vegetables? Tomatoes, beans, yes, they're above ground vegetables. Who said beans? I thought that was an excellent thing to say. Okay. So eggplants would be good. Probably your green leafies like the salads as well. So the above ground vegetables tend to make the sugar go in more slowly. So if you can think about it that way, it'll help you make your choices, especially if you have trouble with your blood sugars. For most of the rest of us who do not have that challenge, it's not nearly, you don't need to worry about that. Just eat the whole food and it will do fine. There's another type of carbohydrate that you may not be aware of, which I will say a little bit more about here. Let's see. Fiber-rich carbohydrates are our body's best source of energy. That's what our body prefers. So the whole foods bring those to us nicely. So this whole concept of an essential carbohydrate, you may have heard of essential fats, and we'll say a little more about that as we go. And you know that there are proteins, if the amino acids, that if you don't have them, you're not going to be able to live. We call them essential amino acids. There are actually essential carbohydrates as well, but they're not very well studied. An essential carbohydrate is one that we can't make ourselves, but our body still needs. There are major ones, and then there are some minor ones that are rather interesting. I've chosen on page 41 to introduce you to a couple of them. One is called fucose, F-U-C-O-S-E. When it ends in O-S-E, it's usually a sugar of some kind. Fucose is found in things like mushrooms, kelp, wakame, and even beer yeast. Do you know about the brewer's yeast? Yeah? Uh-huh. So I know when I was young, my grandfather used to make me take these brewer's yeast tablets, and I thought they were a terrible idea. Although as I've gotten older, I don't mind the flavor as much. But brewer's yeast tends to be high in fucose. What does fucose do? There's evidence that fucose actually helps to prevent breast cancer. It's an essential sugar that gets attached to a protein and helps that protein, that part, that enzyme, whatever it may be, actually work better in our body. Another one is called mannose, which is another one of those that kind of attaches and has a whole bunch of things it does. Helps the immune system and a variety of other things. So you don't have to worry about getting the essential carbohydrates if you're taking plants, because God has put them within the plants, and when you eat the whole plant, you get those pieces. Any questions about the carbohydrates? Was that understandable? You've got a runner coming after you here. That'll work.
I get mixed explanations about mushrooms in general. That it's, and we love mushrooms, but some say that it's high in mold. Some help with Alzheimer's prevention. It just, both sides of the camp.
Well, I have heard that you shouldn't eat mushrooms as well, but I haven't heard it from scientific sources. I hear it from worry sources. What I see in the science is that they're actually good for us and provide actually some really good fibers as well. Huh? Well, no, some mushrooms will kill you. You know that, right? Okay? So I'm not a mushroom aficionado. I don't know how to tell a poisonous one for not, so I pick mine up in the grocery store, right? That's probably safer unless you really know them well. So, was there another question or comment about it?
Yeah, on releasing and how quickly the sugar is released.
Yes.
Where do watermelons come in on that?
So watermelons, I think, fall in on the southern fruit. So they tend to release their sugar rather quickly. They don't have as much sugar as some other things. But if you have trouble with blood sugars and diabetes, probably worthwhile to be a little careful on how much watermelon you take. Not that you never have it, but if it's part of a meal that's high in fiber, it'll help slow that sugar down. So it comes more in the southern fruit. Good question. Yes, sir.
Did I understand you last week when you said that wheat, causes blood sugar to go up?
Wheat makes the blood sugar go up faster than most other grains. I mean, it's one of the ones that makes it go in the fastest. So people who are having a hard time managing their blood sugars, I encourage them to use other grains. So,
such as?
Millet can make some very interesting bread. Rye is probably one of the best ones. I know I've seen some excellent work on rye. Oats are good, better the larger pieces rather than if you're comparing, whole grain oats, the steel cut ones are going to be better than Cheerios, which are highly refined oats, right? The fiber is still there. They're using the whole thing, but they've taken it and made it into smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces are absorbed faster. If they're larger pieces, it takes longer for the sugar to be absorbed. So buckwheat, for some reason, several years ago, my wife and I visited Ukraine, and their buckwheat tastes a whole lot better than our buckwheat here. Not sure what the difference is, but there may be differences in where things are grown as well. Did that answer your question? Look around, and if you're one who's following your blood sugar, see how the grain affects your blood sugars. Generally, we check the blood sugar about 2 hours after you eat something, and if it's over 140, the blood sugar is over 140, then that was probably too much of whatever that was. You just take less of it next time, okay? Now, I know not everybody has diabetes, but that's an interesting part of it. Okay, looks like we've got one more, and then we're going to move to fats.
Where would avocados fit in, northern or southern?
That's a good question. They're not a very sweet fruit, are they? So they're more, we think of them as a fatty fruit, although that's certainly not all of them. I don't think that avocados would raise the blood sugar very high, but I haven't checked what we call the glycemic index on it to be able to tell you for sure. Miss Dina has an answer. I'm always glad to have her correcting me.
Sorry. But it's surprising, but avocados are very high in fiber.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So eating them, it'll slow the glycemic index, as are pears, by the way, really high in fiber.
And berries.
That's coming from a guy from Texas.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about fats. Now, fats, I told you, have 9 calories per gram. And if you're trying to cut back on your calories, probably a good idea to decrease the amount of fats that you have, because they're treated in kind of a little different way I'm on page 42 now as we're kind of going through this. Good fats, bad fats, and the ugly fats. Fats, no matter how good they are, all have about 9 calories per gram. So there's good ones and there's bad ones and then there's terrible ones. I guess we talked a little about that last time with the monounsaturated and then the trans fats. Ayla wants to turn it into a dance move of some kind. I'm just trying to show the physical characteristics. Okay. So have you all ever heard of the omega-3 fats and the omega-6 fats? These are the essential fats, the ones that we can't make. We can make the saturated fats, we can make the monounsaturated fats, but we can't make the polyunsaturated fats. And these fats are used by the body in some interesting ways. You know we're water systems and we need fat in our bodies. What is fat used for in our bodies? Anybody have some ideas? Energy, it's stored energy because it sits in the background and is useful when energy gets low. We can find some energy stored in our bodies and use that. Good. Anybody else? Brain. So how does the brain use it? The brain function. Now there's several ways, interestingly. One of the things fat is used for in the brain is electrical insulation. So when a nerve is taking a message, it's got a fat envelope around it to keep that from shorting out. So have you heard of multiple sclerosis? Multiple sclerosis is a disease where the body starts to take the fat off the nerves and the messages start to get confused. So it's one of those autoimmune diseases. So fat works as an electrical insulation. Anybody else have an idea what fat might be used for? Not quite long enough. Hormone signaling. Now, this is the one where the fats really get interesting, where those essential fats come in. So, have any of you heard the word prostaglandin? I don't see anybody. Very few. I heard one yes, so some people have heard about it. So let's talk about it this way, which I think is kind of interesting. If our body wants to send a message from our brain to our toe, it uses a nerve, right? If our body needs to send a message from our adrenal gland or our thyroid gland to the whole body, what's used? Well, we call it a hormone, right? So these hormones float into the bloodstream and they go around to all the tissues and give, in essence, the same message to all the tissues. So it's a messaging system. There is a time in our body when we need a very local and a very quick message. For example, if you're cutting, what are you cutting? Your beets, and your knife hits your finger and it starts to bleed. You want the blood to stop bleeding. You want it to stop, but you don't want all the blood in your body to stop. So a hormone wouldn't be a good idea here, right? Because then all your blood would coagulate. So the messengers that are very close, very quick, they do quick and then they quit, are the prostaglandins. And we get several kinds of those. They come from either the omega-3 oils or the omega-6 oils. And the omega-6 oils are very inflammatory. We need them. We need some of them, but if we have too much of them, it can actually increase inflammation in our body. And then the omega-3s are much less inflammatory. Here's an interesting thing. A friend of mine was doing a study looking at these fats and their effect on menstrual cramps. Some of us have never experienced those, but some of us have, right? So he wanted to know whether a plant-based diet would make any difference in the menstrual cramps. So he got a group of women and randomly assigned them to either the standard American diet or to spend 3 months on a 100% plant-based diet. And then at the end of the 3 months, if they'd been on the plant-based, they were supposed to switch back to the regular American. They were on the regular American, the standard American diet, the SAD diet. They were supposed to switch back to switch to the plant-based diet. Real hard time doing the study because the ladies who got on the plant-based diet got so much better, so much faster. They didn't want to go back to the standard American diet. It made a huge difference. And the very likely reason for this is those omega-3 fats, because they started to come into the body and be released, and they're very calm by comparison to the omega-6 ones. Does that make sense to you? It's a fascinating system that God has put into the body. I've got a question up here. So he's asking about...
What about the omega-9?
Omega-9, because our body's fats have 18 carbons in them, and every time they get a bend in them, we call it, another bend, and really the omega-3 and the omega-6 fats are those with a bunch of bends. If you take all but one of those away, that's the omega-9, you actually have olive oil, okay? So the omega-9 is in essence olive oil. And that isn't turned into prostaglandins. So at least we haven't found it, as I remember, we haven't found it in the body. It's a theoretical thing, but it has not really been identified as acting in our body in such a way. Interesting kind of this business. Now, most Americans get a lot more omega-6. And we can get that from plants. So when you refine oils and you're eating, for example, canola oil, small amounts of it, I don't think are a problem. I think it's good. It's got a lot of monounsaturated fats. But it will have a lot of the omega-6. And especially when there's a lot of refining with oils added, you get lots and lots of omega-6. And that keeps the omega-3 from working, doing what it should be doing. So it's better to have really the whole plants, because as you eat more of a whole plant diet that's less refined, you have much less of the inflammatory response. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is best at around 6 to 1, 6 of the omega-6 to 1 of the omega-3. The average American is taking 18 to 20 of the omega-6 to 1 of the omega-3. So eating from plants, and remember those omega-3s are all over the place, so that you don't have to just get them from walnuts or flaxseed, although those are high in omega-3s, but even cucumbers and tomatoes and other plants have small amounts of those. So you don't have to really worry about it if you're eating whole plants. Any other questions about these special fats? If they're packaged in their original container, they tend to do better for us. The way God put them together, in plants, they come with their own cholesterol. Does that make sense? If plants don't have cholesterol, we have cholesterol. I think we mentioned this last time. Animals make cholesterol, but plants make their own, what we call phytosterols. They're cholesterol-like. And so when we get fats in plants, our body doesn't need to make as much cholesterol. I think last time, didn't I say something about cholesterol is a soap or a detergent? Did I say that last time, or am I remembering something else? Huh? I didn't say it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I talk to a lot of people about this, so sometimes, your faces look familiar, and I think I've told you before, so apologize. So fat goes into the body. Fat and water do not mix together. If you get grease in your pants, you take your pants off, you put them in the washing machine, you turn on the water, and the only reason you expect the oil or grease to come out of your pants is because you add some soap or detergent. And since our body needs fat in order to make our bodies work, it needs a detergent or a soap to move it around in our water systems. We're 65% or so water. So when we take a fat into our body, in the stomach, it's not mixing very well with the water things. The proteins and the carbohydrates are not mixing a lot with the fats. The fat tend to go by themselves. Our stomach then releases these slowly. The stomach empties at about 10 grams of fat per hour. So it's a slow release. And then our soap dispenser releases the soap. Do you all know about the soap dispenser? It's called a gallbladder. Okay, it holds the soap. And when you when you take a little fat and it goes into your small intestine, a little messenger goes to the gallbladder, the soap dispenser, and says contract. And so it sends a little soap down into the intestines, and it puts the fat in a little package that then goes down the intestines and is absorbed rather efficiently into the wall of the intestines. It's then taken apart and put back together and released into something we call the lymphatics. Have you heard about the lymphatics? It's not directly into the blood. It goes into the lymphatics, goes up the back of the chest, and is dumped into the heart, or to the blood, just before the blood goes into the heart. So we call those chylomicrons. So they're big, round balls of fat that are running around in your blood. This doesn't sound good, does it? No. Okay. And those fat globs run along until they run into a blood vessel that's too small for them to get through, and they stick there. And when they stick there, there's an enzyme around in the blood vessels and in the packages called lipoprotein lipase that takes the fat out and helps it go into the tissues. That makes the glob a little smaller, so it scoots on a little further, and it does the same thing again until it gets quite a bit smaller and can get through. So you see, ladies, it's true. You don't even have to eat the candy bar, just apply it directly to your hips. It ends up that our body prefers carbohydrates for energy, and fat is more likely to be stored. And then when it runs out of carbohydrates, it'll go back and look for the fat and then burn it. Does that make sense? And it's carbohydrates and fat, calories are different. They're handled differently in our body. So be careful about those fats. We don't like to have too many of them. We'd like to have kind of fewer of them and good quality fats that help us with decrease our inflammation without having us gain weight. Yes?
Some people don't have a gallbladder.
Yes.
Can you address that?
Sure. Some people have lost their gallbladder, or somebody stole their gallbladder. Okay? You might even know the guy's name, right? So gallbladders are not necessary. The soap is actually made in the liver. Okay? And if you don't have a gallbladder, you don't have a soap dispenser, but you still have all the tubing in place. So what the liver makes can do that. And those of you who don't have a gallbladder know that if your gallbladder is gone and you have a high fatty meal, you're going to get diarrhea. Okay? Because that fat can't be managed, it's not going to be put in the packages that it should be, and it's going to cause a diarrhea and it'll run through. So that's a good reminder, when that happens, not to do that again. Okay? So our body has a way of reminding us. But you can get by without a gallbladder. So hope that at least helps a little bit. Another question up here.
When I'm looking in the grocery store for oil, fat oil, I get confused because there's so many and I don't know which one to buy. You know, some of them's corn oil, some of them it says heart healthy. What brand is good?
What brand is good? This is a challenging question, I think, for all of us. I'm trying to answer that question a little differently than you might expect. I'd rather not give you a brand. I would say whatever you use small amounts of it and focus on the plants. And then the balance will be good. I mean, you use a little bit so things don't stick to your pan, but you're not frying in it, right? So you helped with that balance. So there are some things that make good fats bad, and maybe fats that may not have been considered as good also better for us. And I think I mentioned this last time, maybe not. Monounsaturated fats like olive oil don't tend to smoke. When they smoke, they're being broken down, and they're not damaged by the heat like the polyunsaturates. You might think from what we said, those omega-3 oils would be really good for you to eat, but if you get them in it should be in a dark glass jar. You should keep it in the refrigerator or the freezer because those degrade very quickly and they go rancid, and there's evidence that rancidity also causes health problems for us. So I would like you to get your good fats from whole foods, and then, pick a reasonable olive oil or canola oil, which is not really a bad oil. It's high in monounsaturates. So, there are many out there. If you'd like coconut oil, that's fine too, as long as you're using small amounts of it. Okay? I'm not going to worry about the brand or even so much what you're using, as long as it's small volumes and you're eating lots of plants, because they will provide what you really need. Okay? Some of us feel like we need a little extra of the omega-3, and that's a very reasonable thing to do when we're transitioning from the standard American diet to a plant-based diet, because the standard American diet clogs up the machinery, and it takes a little time for it to kind of unloosen and start to move smoothly. So if you want a little extra, walnuts is really good for the omega-3. You eat the whole food. It's safe in there. God put a package in it that protects it so it's not deteriorating. You can tell when your nuts start to go rancid, then you know those oils are beginning to get damaged. I keep ours in our freezer until we actually are taking them out. So, and then flaxseed. Flaxseed, interestingly, has a little cyanide in it. So they recommend not more than 2 tablespoons in a day. If you take the whole seed, you will find the whole seed coming out the backside, okay? So it kind of needs to be ground up. The best time to grind it up is just before you eat it. So you put it in a little coffee grinder, push the button until it's whizzed up into small pieces, put it on your oatmeal. You've got a lot of fiber, you've got a lot of omega-3, and that's a good way to get really both of those into your body if you need a little bit extra.
What about chia?
She's asking about chia. So chia is also, will have the omega-3 in it, not as much as the flax, but it would be a good choice. You'll get a little more of that. It's got a lot of soluble fiber in it. It kind of gets sticky when you soak it in water. Yes, okay.
On the brown flax seed,
Yes?
I can never get that to grind up. But the golden goes to like a flour.
Okay, you better get golden. Or a better coffee grinder. Okay. Yeah, some of them are a little harder, and maybe how long they've set may make a difference. Yes?
My question is, on the omega-3s, has fish oil. What happens if you're allergic to the fish oil?
So that's a good question as well. Fish oil may be a good way to get the omega-3s. The plant omega-3s and omega-6s are at a lower level, if you will. They're at the 18 carbon length, and the fish oil are at like 22. So they have some additional changes to them. You have exactly the same enzymes as the fish does. You can make fish oil just like fish does. And the omega-3 in the fish is there because of what? The plants that the fish ate. If these are farmed fish and they didn't give them omega-3s, the fish are not going to have omega-3 in them. So everything starts with the plant omega-3, and then it's moved to the animal, which is what the fish is, and what we are. And we have all the enzymes necessary to make those essential essential fats. Okay? Yes, sir.
I know I shouldn't eat it, but I like on my green leafy vegetables to add a dressing. Mm-hmm. Now, in the grocery store, they have dressings labeled fat-free. Uh-huh. What's your take on those?
Maybe they don't charge you for it. I don't know. Usually, the fat-free products will have to have something to give it a bit of an oily kind of feel, a little bit of bulk to it. Some of them will use fiber. Some of them will use carbohydrate gels. Have you seen, for example, I can't believe it's not butter? Right? That's another one of those oils that's not supposed to. Did he say something wrong? Okay. Okay, so that is actually an oil, and because it's all bent up, it's an oil at room temperature, and you can't spread it. So they suspend it in a carbohydrate gel. Okay? So it's got carbohydrates around it holding the oil. If you melt it, it won't go back to what it was because it tears that apart. But it makes it easy for us to use. So does that help at all? I mean, I can't.
Are the fat-frees healthier than
The fat-frees often have quite a bit of sugar in them, but it's very reasonable to me when I look at the label to say I'd like to have the fat-free one and discover, hopefully they're using some fiber and maybe some complex carbohydrates in that. Those carbohydrate gels tend to do okay. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Something that might pair off of that I've been doing for salads is a little bit of olive oil with some oregano and rosemary and thyme, and it just makes a really good dressing, and it's all fresh, and it goes a long way. It makes it nice and savory.
That's very good. You remember, I think last time, didn't we talk about whole food? And if you smash up corn, you get about 16 to 18 ears worth of corn oil in 1 tablespoon. So when you spritz that oil on with the flavorings, just be careful not to put too much of it on, right? So yes, that's a nice way of doing it. Uh-oh, we're going to move on here shortly.
I understood that corn isn't all that good for you. That was question number 1. Number 2, can you say something about wheat germ?
Wheat germ is the stuff that the fiber and the vitamins that they pulled off of the wheat when they made white flour, okay? So it's a good thing to add in. You can add it for extra fiber. You can add it for extra B vitamins. So wheat germ would be a good choice. Now, you think that corn is bad. Corn has been changed quite a bit, and the eating corn is a little different than the stuff they may use for manufacturing. The oils are going to be, it's not a terrible oil. It's going to have monounsaturated, it's going to have saturated fat, and a little bit of polyunsaturated. So I think, as we've talked already, if you're going to be using an oil, use small amounts, and it really shouldn't matter where it comes from as long as it's not rancid. Okay? Quinoa is a good grain. As with all of these things, we tend to need to embrace new flavors. So things are a little different than maybe what we're used to. There was another hand over.
Yeah, last week you mentioned that we have to read the labels, and if they have a lot ingredients, they are not good. So adding to his question, I was searching for dressings because sometimes, I get lazy to prepare, but everything that I research, they have a lot of ingredients, so I decided not to do it. And also, I have this app, the name is Yuka. You scan all the products, and I don't follow what they put, fat-free, vegan, all these things. When you see all the ingredients, you get in shock. They have a lot of bad things like artificial sweeteners and a lot of stuff. So the best thing, like he said in the back, is to make it yourself. And you go to YouTube and Instagram, and they have a lot of recipes. And you can call Jasmine too.
Yeah. So that app, I haven't used it, but I've heard about it before. And when you look at you take a picture of the label, and it'll tell you really everything that's in there. So we're all kind of in different places in our eating. If we were to say, don't use any of those salad dressings, that would be too much for some people. So some of us are transitioning. So their general principle is you'll be best off if you have few ingredients. If less than 2 or 3, you're actually putting it together yourself. But if you're on the transition, it's okay to do some of those transition products. They will help you be healthier than the standard American diet. So that's good. Okay, time is passing here fairly quick. And the next thing that we have to talk about here is what about water? I'm on page 44. So hydrate for your health. We're water systems. We need water in order to be healthy. If we get dehydrated, we have some nasty things that happen in our bodies. Kidney stones, I suppose we could talk about. That's one of the things that comes from being dehydrated. But water is very beneficial, no calories, right? I made it one of the 5 macronutrients. So you put it in, it hydrates you, it helps you do better. Now, on the bottom of the page, you see it says, eat your water. Does that make any sense? Eat your water. So let me explain it to you. So we can drink water, and the water comes in. When we take whole plants and we cook them, there's water within them. But even within the calories, there's water. Because when our body burns carbohydrates or proteins or fats for energy, it turns them into carbon dioxide and water. So as you burn it, you're actually making water. How much water do we need? I mean, that's kind of the big question. Usually it's 6 to 8 cups, right? But that calculation was actually done with the understanding that some of that water was coming from the food, because as the food is digested and burned, it's turned into carbon dioxide, which we breathe out, and water, which we urinate or sweat out, right? So science has not given us a good way of knowing for sure how much water we need. You know, you can get too much water. They call it drowning. Okay, it's dangerous. If you bring that into your lungs, the oxygen is gone. So too much water is dangerous. Too little water tends to cause problems in the body. So getting the right amount is the question. And we've been unable to get science that tells us what the right amount is and how to tell. So this is a way we kind of think about it. We would like to have our urine just slightly yellow. Not bright yellow. Now, that doesn't work if you're taking B vitamin supplements, right? That turns everything bright yellow. So that makes it a little more difficult. So take enough water so your urine is slightly yellow, not dark yellow. That would be kind of the recommendation from where I sit, and hopefully that works well for you. How best to get your water in? It's easy to get dehydrated. My father-in-law, I think, came up with one of the best ways of doing this. As we get older, we have less desire for thirst, so our thirst mechanism tends to decrease. So what he started doing, and this just made a lot of sense to me, is 20 to 30 minutes before eating a meal, he took a big glass of water. So probably equivalent to about 3 cups if you were measuring it. And then that water went into his system. He was hydrated. When he ate, that water would then join the food, help with the digestion process, and provided enough water that lasted long enough until the next meal. My own practice is to take about 3 cups in a large glass when I first get up in the morning and when I first get home from work, and then at night. So I try to get them that way and kind of spread it out. One of the things you can do if you get too much water and you don't have enough salt is to pull out the salt, wash out the salt. And if you don't have enough salt, it causes, or sodium in your blood, it can cause significant problems as well. It can go so bad as to make the heart stop, and you don't want that to happen for sure. So make sure that if you're drinking lots of water, you're also getting at least a moderate amount of salt. Okay? Anybody have any questions about the...
Should you drink water with your meals?
That's an interesting question about how physiology works. It ends up that our body needs the food in our stomach at a particular consistency where it digests best. So if you have a lot of fluid with your meal, the body will need to absorb that water first. If you don't have enough water, then your body, in your food, the body will have to take water from the blood and push it into the food. Once it reaches that pasty consistency, it ends up, and it usually takes maybe 45 minutes to an hour after you eat. Then the body, and this is fascinating to me, if you take water at that point, it kind of makes a channel through the paste and goes right through quickly into the small intestine and can be absorbed. So I'm not sure that I've actually answered your question. If you have a meal that is soup, it's going to have quite a bit of water in it, right? So the soup it tends to be a little more liquid. So if you drink extra water with that, your body's going to have to take more water out of it. If you're eating dry stuff, you may need a little bit of extra fluid with it. Does that make sense? So you're looking for that balance, and our body has the ability to adjust as long as you don't throw too much in. Now, I thought my father-in-law's idea was a good one because the water was absorbed quickly. The maximum our body can absorb is about 1 liter per hour. Okay? So if you take that on an empty stomach, it will absorb a lot faster than if there's food in your stomach. So if you did it before your meal, you would get yourself well hydrated. It would be in your blood. And then if your food needs a little more, it will pull the water out of the blood, and it'll be coming in with the digestive enzymes that are needed, right? Otherwise, if you have too much water, the digestive enzymes are diluted, and now it's a little harder to get them working, and the digestion may not be so well. So that's kind of probably the best way to look at it, although our bodies are pretty flexible. I would say experiment on yourself and see how it does. I have another hand here.
Thank you. How much salt is enough? Because I hear that salt is not particularly good for you.
You know, on page 48, we're going to talk about that. So the salt part is coming. And that's an interesting thing, okay? So the other thing that I want to point out here is at the top of page 45, and this whole thing of vasopressin. It's a stress hormone. When we get dehydrated, it tends to come out. And the stress hormone is not good for us. I mean, it's stressful on the body. So staying hydrated is important. If you take water on a regular basis and have adequate amounts of salt, everything should work fine. You shouldn't have to worry about it. We'll come back and hit the salt here in a little bit. Let's see, that was the hydrate for health. There's the eat your water and keep vasopressin at bay by making sure you have enough fluid. We've talked a little about how much water do I need. It's hard to be specific on that from the science, so try to use the kind of the color of your urine as a nice way to tell. The next section, and this is on page 46, is we eat food, not nutrients. The film, of course, said a little bit about that. You don't go out and pick individual nutrients, although some people do. They will get, for example, a protein powder that they're going to take to add to their meal to add more protein. That's kind of pulling out something separate. Better to get it really in the package that God made it in. And as we eat an eating pattern, which eating patterns do you think are the healthiest? Any ideas? Well, maybe we should talk about what an eating pattern is. Standard American diet is an eating pattern, okay? Mediterranean diet would be kind of another pattern, which we kind of think of. A lot of tomatoes, olive oil, vegetables, pasta. So that's kind of what we think of with Mediterranean. Yeah?
I was thinking when I was like younger, my kids were younger, if you just don't eat the meat and you don't eat the fish, then you're having a wonderful vegetarian diet. And my kids later on, I heard them talking, and it's like if you're having mac and cheese and you're having ramen noodles and you're having lots of pastries and ice cream and cake and such, it's really not a healthy diet. And I'm like,
even though you could call it vegetarian.
It's like, well, I'm not eating the bad stuff, but you're just still eating it.
Well, this is why the best pattern is actually the whole food plant-based. So eating the whole plants is generally the best way of doing that, minimally processed. And that would be, I would consider it the healthiest pattern. In scientific studies, the Mediterranean tends to come out very well because it's high in minimally processed foods. And I mentioned earlier, you don't have to be a vegetarian. To be healthy, you just need to eat a lot of plants. And the Mediterranean diet is one of those because it often includes a little bit of fish too, right? So it's not harmful from that standpoint. Certainly a whole lot better than the standard American diet. We're running already short on time, and I need to talk about, we eat food, not nutrients. So the next slide here is let's talk about gluten, and this is going to eat up all the rest of our time. How are we going to get through this? I've been talking too much. Okay. So let me say a little bit about gluten. There's a lot of concern about gluten in today's world. True sprue or celiac disease is actually not very common. People that really have the allergy to gluten. But there are many people who do better, especially those with irritable bowel. Maybe you've heard that diagnosis. Many people with irritable bowel do much better if they go on a gluten-free diet. So it's not a true celiac disease, but people often do better. Now, I have some concern. I think that maybe this is related to the diet that we're eating and the way food is grown in this country. I have patients who will not buy bread made in this country. They have their wheat imported from Europe, and then they make their own bread because they have bad reaction to the wheat in this country. And I think it has something to do with the spray. Not so much the GMO, although there's a backdoor connection with the GMO. But you've heard of the glyphosate or Roundup? So that kills the plants, and they spray it on to try to kill the weeds, and then they use GMO wheat or other grain that is resistant to the glyphosate. So when they do that, there is going to be some of the glyphosate within the food product. And I think that's what the problem is from a wheat standpoint. A friend of mine, I guess I learned it from an internist friend of mine who had a friend he was working with who was a veterinarian and discovered that horses that were really acting up, it was the glyphosate. He had to get them off the glyphosate before they would actually straighten up. What's wrong with the glyphosate? Well, it doesn't bother us because we don't have the enzyme that it works on. But it works on the gut bacteria. You know, the good ones, the microbiome? So that's where the problem is. The glyphosate tends to mess with the gut bacteria. So I think people who don't tolerate wheat well would do well to stay away from it, and I think that's fine to do. You may do fine if you use European-grown wheat because they don't use the glyphosate. It's just not allowed there. So that might be beneficial for you. Oh, I've got another question. Trying to do this quickly. So.
Okay, would organic wheat make any difference?
Organic wheat should be better, okay, because they're not supposed to use those types of sprays on it. So we would hope so. You're going to have to decide for yourself. When the good bacteria are killed off, they don't make what the intestines need in order to be healthy, something called butyrate. It's a short-chain fatty acid that good bacteria make out of fiber. So people who have a high fiber diet, for example, wheat doesn't bother my stomach at all because I have such a high fiber diet. The bacteria, the good bacteria, have a lot to work on so they can make the butyrate so we don't get the, maybe you've heard this term, leaky gut, okay? So we don't have trouble with the leaky gut if we have adequate fiber and the right bacteria. Well, we covered an awful lot all of a sudden, so let's do the best we can with that, and let's talk a little bit about salt. So, we're on page 48 now. Salt and sodium. We all know that too much salt is not good because it increases the risk of stroke and heart attack, but a lot of people don't know that too little salt also increases the risk of death, okay? So too little salt. How much is too little? How much is too much? This is a little bit of a challenge for us from what I can tell, having researched the literature. One needs about, and it's going to depend on how much water you drink, but the good goal is about 1 teaspoon of salt a day. And that is, each gram of sodium is about 1/2 teaspoon. So 1 gram of sodium is about 1/2 teaspoon. So 1 teaspoon should give you the 2 grams and be enough, as long as you don't drink so much water that you completely wash it out. If you don't get enough sodium in your diet, it activates the renin-angiotensin system. That makes your blood vessels clamp down instead of opening up. It seems backwards. It also tends to make blood sugars go up, and it increases vascular tone, so it tends to make the blood vessels get tight when your sodium goes too low. So you don't want it too low, and you don't want it too high. Did I cause anybody any heartburn? And we got a question here, and I see one over there.
I heard that vegetables, they have sodium. Is that right? Or
Vegetables
we need
do
to
not
add
have
salt?
very much sodium. They have a lot of potassium, but not very much sodium, as a general rule. So sodium tends to be relatively low in fruits and vegetables.
I know I'm not the only one, and I know there's a lot of people out there that suffer from it, but like I have poor circulation. And they tell you to stay away from salt. But at the same time, you want to have a little bit of salt.
I think if you aim for that 1 teaspoon, you'll be in a safe zone. I will tell you that when Thanksgiving hits, the emergency room fills up with people with congestive heart failure, right? So because they have that big meal, all that sodium comes in and they tend to blow up with fluid and they go in. Well, what happens when you suddenly increase the sodium is that your blood pressure goes up and it puts a bunch of stress on the heart. But that lasts about 3 days. So it's actually that constant level. And there's some very interesting studies that say that people with congestive heart failure, if they get their sodium too low, they die sooner. They spend more time in the hospital. And even people with diabetes, there's a great study out of Australia that looked at people with diabetes and how much sodium they ate. The lower their sodium, the more likely they were to die sooner. So you need that kind of basic amount, but you need it steady. You don't need the rain that is a whole bunch, a flood of sodium at one time. You need steady state, okay? And I think 1 teaspoon a day is about right for most people. Now you listen to your doctor, okay? I'm not your doctor, but I'm telling you a little about the science of it, okay? For those who want to know more about it, page 49, and the references are there for the studies that I spoke to. Okay, on page 50 and 51, you have an opportunity to go through in group 1, 2, 3, and 4. How many of the foods do you eat in any of these areas? This will give you a sense for your own exercise, your own understanding of the eating pattern that you have. So try to move towards kind of group 1 or 2 rather than the group 3 or 4 to be a little healthier on that. We won't do a lot of time with it right now. Okay, principle number 2 we've been talking about all along, haven't we? I'm on page 52. So you better to eat unprocessed or minimally processed food rather than highly processed food. That would even be true if you were picking beef, right? So it would be a lot better for you to have grass-fed beef that was organic, didn't have all the chemicals in it, than to have, that which may be ground up in a Frankfurter. I mean, we know that that's significantly worse. So minimally processed is best for animal products and for plant products. Of course, more plants is what we encourage the most of. Let's see. I gave the little example here on page 52 of corn, which I mentioned already, 16 to 18 ears of corn. I go into about a tablespoon of corn oil. Better to have the corn than the corn oil. It tends to really concentrate the calories. So preferably unprocessed. So as you're choosing, try to choose things that are less processed. Wow, the clock is going fast, isn't it? Gratitude, page 54. Try a gratitude journal, write some things down. The rule is, when you do your gratitude journal, to really get the best out of this now, right, is you don't repeat for either, you decide ahead of time, 3 or 6 months. So if you do it today, you can't choose it again for another 3 to 6 months. So one of the things that can also help is you can be glad that it wasn't worse, right? So try to look at things from a positive standpoint and be thankful. So that's best for us. You can see lifestyle tips, gratitude, questions to ask yourself to get the juices flowing. What did I learn today? What about my body makes me grateful? What part of my childhood am I thankful for? There's a bunch of ideas to kind of help you with gratitude. Makes a huge difference in our physiology. Remember to be thankful. And of course, knowing that God loves us and cares for us can make a huge difference in our sense of gratitude, especially as we look to the gifts that He has given to us. The last one in the last few minutes, last 3 minutes, is sleep. And this is one of my wife's very favorite topics. Sleep is important. Too little sleep is a problem. Too much sleep is a problem. It should be between 7 and 9 hours a night, and every one of us is a little bit different. So sleeping, try to please avoid sleeping pills. They tend to cause a lot of problems, and you kind of get dependent on them. They should only be used for kind of emergencies or short periods of time. A lot of people are unaware that the coffee they drink in the morning, 50% of it, no, about 25% of it is still left there in the evening when you go to bed. So caffeine can kind of keep us awake, and cutting out the caffeine. Patients will say to me, but I only have 1 cup. It's nothing. I said, well, good, it'll be easy to quit. And then they discover they're having caffeine withdrawal. I mean, that's kind of what's happening because, well, caffeine, if you're having a hard time sleeping, not a good idea. Caffeine tends to keep you awake. Am I telling you to never have caffeine? I'm not trying to get into the no caffeine argument. Yes?
How about decaffeinated?
Well, decaffeinated is not completely caffeine-free, but it's almost gone. And that would be a good choice. I mean, that would be a way to kind of move away from it. If you enjoy that hot cup in the morning, you've got something that's going to cause less trouble. Although I will tell you, the caffeine is not the part of coffee that raises cholesterol. There's another part that tends to do the cholesterol-raising part. I know you didn't know coffee raised cholesterol. Sorry. Okay. Well, the film already mentioned, get a routine, exercise vigorously during the day makes a big difference. Light makes a huge difference, and this is probably the biggest thing. Have you all heard of seasonal affective disorder? So it's depression that comes, we think of it in the North Country, it comes when people don't see light, and light is necessary to make serotonin in our brain. So it's also necessary to suppress melatonin. So when the lights go off, melatonin rebounds. So light is really important for sleep. You need to get it in the daytime. When you first get up, it helps you go to sleep that night. Getting light about 4 o'clock in the afternoon helps you stay asleep because it suppresses that melatonin a little bit longer. So I see a lot, I think, in Florida, especially in the summer, of seasonal affective disorder. People are actually getting depressed because they're indoors all the time. It's too hot to go outside. They wait till the lights are out to go outside. So get outside for a little sunshine. You don't have to be in the sunshine. You just need to sit on the porch and look at the sky. You need 10,000 lux of broad spectrum light for about 30 or 40 minutes, something like that, in the morning or in the evening around 4 o'clock, and in the evening at about 4 o'clock. To give you an idea of how much brightness that is, the lux is a measure of brightness. A summer day with sunshine up there in Florida has about 30,000 lux. So you can get plenty of light even if there's a little bit of a cloud cover. For those of you that can't, get a therapeutic light, put it on your desk, turn it on when you're at work, and it'll help your seasonal affective disorder, and it'll help you sleep at night. I think this is probably the trick that works for the most people. They're just indoors too much. Wow, I talked fast. We had a good time, and our time is up. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to talking again with you next week.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Guthrie. I know your brains are full of good information now. Don't forget that you can purchase some books if you have not already, and there's a cookbook available as well that we put out there as well. All right, well, let's go ahead and close up in prayer. One more thing.
I just want to encourage all of you to try to implement one thing that you learned tonight, this week, all right? And if you have the cookbook, you bought it last Saturday evening, or you might be purchasing, try one of the recipes, all right?
All right, let's pray together. Dear Father, we're grateful for the information we learned. Lord, help us apply it to our lives. We know that ultimately when we do, we'll feel happier, we'll feel healthier, and so we're grateful for the information tonight. Be with us, guide us back home, keep us safe, and Lord, help us to have a great week this week. We thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, have a good evening, everyone.